If three boys try to sell you candy at Eldham Station, don't talk to them. Part 2. By u/magpiepie_quill. There was a knock on my door. I jumped, banging my aching head against the steel railing of my bed and nearly ripping out my IV. "Mr. Warren?" A muffled woman's voice said from outside. "You have a visitor." I cleared my throat, trying to ignore the stinging pain in my ribcage when I spoke. What little sound I could manage came out with a handful of gravel. "Who?" "Your best friend, sir." I gripped the side of my bed and with some effort pulled myself upright. I peered at the frosted glass panes set into the door, two shadows lingering outside. "I don't know who you're talking about," I croaked. "You do," the woman said. "It's Percy." I felt my hair stand on end. The door opened with a click. Standing in the hallway was a nurse, and beside her, a small boy in suspenders with a mane of blonde hair. "Hi, Jacob," Percy said, grinning. "I missed you." I scrambled back in my bed, sending flares of pain up and down my limbs. No, I stammered. That's not my friend, nurse. You've got to..." I swallowed hard. "You've got to take him away from me." The nurse smiled pleasantly, then her smile twisted into a menacing snarl. I shrank back, and Percy burst out laughing. He held up his hand, closed around a crumpled Smarties wrapper and torn piece of newspaper. "One dead, one injured, an Eldham late-night bus accident. Suicide, terror, or something else." "Jacob Warren," Percy said. "That's your name, huh? I like it. I like it a lot." He turned to the nurse and nodded. "You can go now. Thank you for your help." The nurse turned and walked out to the hallway, closing the door behind her. Percy walked over and plopped himself into the chair by my bed. "How are you feeling, Jacob?" "What did you do to the nurse?" I rasped. Percy smiled. "Adults love candy almost as much as little boys do. She thought it was very nice of me." "And the bus driver?" "He's dead," he said matter-of-factly. Then he let out a small giggle, slammed his head into the steering wheel. His skull cracked open like an egg. You... Percy pulled a roll of Smarties from his pocket and tossed it into my lap. "Here," he said. "A get-well-soon gift just for you. Don't throw it away like before, okay? It's a gift from the heart." I wiggled in my sheets and bandages, and the Smarties rolled off my leg and bounced onto the floor. The smile vanished from Percy's face. He got up from his chair, picked up the candy, and pressed it hard onto my lap. Searing white pain exploded from the cracks in my bones. I let loose a guttural scream. "Quiet," Percy said, gazing coldly into my eyes. "You don't want them to find out about me, do you?" I whimpered. Hot tears rolled in my eyes. Percy chuckled to himself and went back to sit in his chair. "Aaron got mad at me," he said. I couldn't manage more than shallow gasps for breath. "He said I was too mean to you. That I should have believed you when you said you didn't like Smarties. It's not nice to force people to eat stuff they don't like. All that." For a while, we sat in silence. I watched Percy dangle his feet from his chair. My phone on the bedside table lit up with a new text message. We both glanced down at the screen. Sydney, 3:12 p.m. "Get better soon. I found a brunch cafe you would love." You've got nice people everywhere around you, haven't you? I took my phone and put it on the other side of my bed. Percy crossed his arms and let out a huff. "Aaron sent me here to say sorry. So, sorry I was mean to you." I didn't have anything to say. Who does when the person who tried to murder you comes back to your hospital bed to apologize? "Well, I said it," Percy said, jumping to his feet. "See you later, Jacob." Wait, where do you think you're going?" He tilted his head and grinned. "Do you want me to stay?" I pulled my sheets around myself and shook my head.
I'm going back to Aaron and Dominique, he said. Back to the station.
For a good 2 hours after he left, I jumped at every sound in the hallways outside. At some point during my hospitalization, the police came to question me. I told them exactly what happened. The next day, my nurse wheeled me into a test for brain damage. It took me 2 weeks to recover enough to get discharged from the hospital on crutches. It would have been much longer had I not argued for an early release at every chance. Every step sent stinging sensations up my chest, but despite the lingering pain, I told myself my body would grow heavier with my medical bills. I would never be able to pay it off if I didn't get back to work. For the first couple of weeks back to work, I pulled up the ride-sharing app on my phone as soon as I got to the hotel and reserved a ride home to arrive at midnight. On most days, the hours were enough to find me a driver desperate for some extra cash. On the couple days I couldn't find a ride, I made up some medical alibi and got off work early to take the bus. At first, I worried that Percy would show up again, but he never did. Even as I tried to convince myself that he wouldn't harass me anymore, some part of me kept thinking he was just luring me into a false sense of security. Of course, the $30-something rides almost every day began to eat into what little savings I had, and soon enough, I found the rope around my neck tight enough that I had to work my full 5 hours and take the subway home. The crutches scraped on the broken escalator steps as I descended into the underground, step by dreadfully slow step. The boys were still there, by the turnstiles. As I entered, Percy's eyes lit up, and he sat back.
See?
He said, beaming at his friends.
I told you he'd be back.
My stomach knotted up at the thought that I had just walked into the lion's den by my own volition. Dominique regarded me silently. Beside him, Aaron smiled at me with his huge brown eyes.
Hi, Jacob. Welcome back.
Hi, I croaked.
How are you feeling?
I looked at Percy. He looked back up at me, innocently. Please, I sighed. Just let me go. I'm very, very tired. Aaron got to his feet. I'm sorry about what happened, he said, fidgeting with his oversized yellow shirt. I'll make sure Percy doesn't try to make you eat his candy anymore. I nodded absently, touched my transit card to the reader of the turnstiles, and awkwardly pushed the gate with my crutches. Aaron rushed to help. I flinched at first, but he only turned the gate for me, letting me pass through. I'm sorry, he said, about what happened. Behind him, Percy rolled his eyes. Dominique just watched me, silently as always. It was only when I stepped down onto the train platform and the lights flickered overhead that I realized what a huge mistake I had made. The lights blinked out, plunging the platform into utter darkness. As I stared wide-eyed into the solid black that filled my eyes, soft slithering noises filled the empty air to my right. When the lights came back on, Aaron was standing next to me. I started and took a half step back. A thin smile spread across his lips.
Percy was right,
he said.
You really did come back at your own will.
From somewhere behind him, no, somewhere within him, something began to hiss and crackle. I stumbled back, almost tripping over my plaster-casted leg, as the skin of Aaron's back split open with a horrible, wet, rending sound. Slimy black matter spewed out and filled his oversized t-shirt, stretching into a dozen shadowy tendrils that slithered out of his sleeve and behind his neck, arching 10 feet over his head.
I'm glad,
Aaron mused, licking his lips.
I can't wait for a taste of your flesh.
I threw aside my crutches and made a break for the stairs. Every step of my right foot sent a shock of pain through me, but I couldn't dare to stop. The cold brick stairs slammed ruthlessly against the heel of my plaster cast. At the back of my mind, I wondered if my leg would crumble and I would never walk again. Aaron didn't bother to give pursuit, or so it seemed at first. I was almost to the top when the lights went out. I stumbled in the darkness. The stubby toe of my cast slipped on the floor, and I slammed face first into the staircase. My ribs ground hard against the bricks. When the lights flicked back on, Aaron was standing on the top of the stairs. His monstrous silhouette nearly blocked out my view of the turnstiles behind him where Percy had perched, laughing maniacally.
"You're so gullible,"
he cried.
"You were stupid enough to walk right back into our home."
Aaron smiled. His tongue flicked over his teeth.
And now he will never leave.
He stepped forward, and his inky black tendrils shot forward hungrily. A fraction of a second before they could connect, sending pins and needles stabbing at my spine. The black tendrils slammed into the stairs beside me, with this deafening crack, spraying chips of red brick into the air. I heaved myself to my feet and began to stumble back down as Aaron pulverized the stairs behind me. I only made it a couple of steps before a heavy blow caught me on my side, throwing me against the wall. I felt my ribs crack again. The world tilted upside down and I slid down the wall and tumbled down the stairs to the platform. My vision went dark and then came back, though I couldn't be sure if the lights were flickering or if I had blacked out for a split second. Aaron stood over me, his huge brown eyes twisted with bloodlust. I had made the mistake of thinking these were children. They were monsters, wearing the skin of little boys. Slowly, Aaron's shadowy tendrils slithered back into his body and disappeared. He knelt down by my side and licked his lips, beginning to reach for my throat. In a surge of courage that surprised even myself, my hand shot up and latched around his wrist. Summoning all of my strength, I shoved him off balance and slammed him onto the cold brick floor. The speakers crackled overhead, and the jingle announcing the approach of the train began to play. Running on pure adrenaline, I hauled my broken body upright and sprinted down the platform. The lights flickered, in and out, in and out. I knew in the animal instinct part of me that I would die if I stopped moving. Aaron appeared and disappeared beside me, smiling. Wisps of black shadows whipped around us, lashing at my skin and tearing into my jacket. He was toying with me. In the distance behind us, Percy's laughter echoed through the underground. The jingle ended, and a draft began to flow through the underground station. A low roar filled the tunnel. Aaron appeared beside me, his shadows curling toward me. I twisted my body into the sharpest turn I could manage, narrowly avoiding his grasp. I was running dangerously close to the edge of the platform as the lights blinked in and out. I tried to ignore my fear of tripping and falling onto the tracks. I couldn't move away from the edge. I needed Aaron to keep chasing me, to get closer. My whole body was screaming in pain. My heart was pumping like mad. The yellow headlights of the train came into view in the tunnel, and at the same time, Aaron appeared before me, shadows poised to strike. Instead of turning away, I slammed right into him and clamped my hands around his shoulders. He was a monster, but his body was that of a little boy. The smile drained from his face. His eyes grew wide. Using my momentum, I staggered forward and threw this 10-year-old body off the platform, a split second before the train blasted through the station. In the cold rush of wind, an inhuman scream filled the underground. The lights flickered in a frenzy, throbbing in and out so fast my eyes strained to see straight. The train wheels squealed on the tracks. The scream twisted into a wet, gurgling moan. The train stopped and the doors opened, dripping blood from the slashes across my cheeks and arms. I dragged my body onto the empty cart. As I stepped over the inch-wide crack between the train and the platform, I thought I saw glistening black liquid bubbling from the tracks below. Aaron's moans slowly faded, and the lights stopped flickering. The doors of the train car slid closed. Then, just as the train began to move, The lights in the station blacked out. I staggered toward the window and only saw my reflection stare back with hollow eyes. Something outside was growling. Something under the floor. As we slowly picked up speed, the lights in the station came back on, and I stumbled back from the window. The glass was covered in crisscrossing shadowy black tendrils, slamming and clawing at the window from the outside. The train lurched unnaturally, and the car shuddered. The wheels made slow grinding sounds on the tracks that resonated through my broken bones. The black tendrils lashed at the window again and again. Hairline cracks appeared in the glass, growing longer and wider with every strike. I stared out helplessly and tried to keep my nausea under control as my teeth chattered and my stomach slowly turned. Aaron drove his shadows hard into the window, and the cracks joined into one giant spiderweb pattern. One more strike, and there would be nothing standing between us. Just as the tendrils reared back, the train burst out into the nighttime city underpass, met with the soft orange streetlights. The shadows gripping the window shuddered and vaporized into black smoke. The floor stopped shaking. The grinding noises faded. Aaron receded behind the train as if met with an invisible barrier that kept him from spilling out into this world. His shadows howled with the wind in the tunnel. Before I could think about anything else, my legs gave out and I crumbled to the floor of the subway car. Slowly, the world darkened and faded around me. Hey guys, 4ShotBot here. I just want to thank you guys for sticking around and checking out this video. Once again, I want to ask you guys to check out the original post. It's by u/magpiee_quill, and I think you guys would really enjoy the original story. Of course, I use the exact same words. It's just reading it yourself is just kind of gets your blood pumping. So I want to thank you guys and consider subscribing.